I think, if we zero in on Islamic finance, what do we learn? We learn that the economy of the Muslims up until the fall of the Caliphate was based on having gold and silver coins. And these were known weights and known qualities of metal. So established on the weights established by Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab, the second Caliph of Islam, the gold dinar, 4.25 grams of basically 22 karat gold. Silver, the silver dirham, 3 grams of pure silver. And this was the basis, a known ratio between the two of 7 dinars to 10 dirhams. So there's a link between the two. And traditionally zakat would always be paid in gold and silver, not in small change, not in what's flus. This is the basis of Muslim economics. I have here an example of these coins. These were minted about 15 years ago now in Dubai. These are minted last year in Indonesia.
So what is this exactly?
And you see the same, basically the same coin, the gold dinar, the silver dirham, and this is a 5 dirham piece.
Okay.
Now, these have intrinsic value. So in the time of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the gold dinar would buy a sheep. Today it will buy a sheep. In the time of the Prophet, a silver dirham would buy a chicken. Today it will buy a chicken. So that's zero inflation in 1400 centuries, 14 centuries. Now if you look actually at the history of mankind in their financial dealings, the use of gold and silver as the basis of money goes back to 3000 BC at least, probably more, but at least 3000 BC. So we have basically 5 millennia proven track record, it works. If we look at paper money, this has a track record of about 2 centuries, and it's gone horribly wrong.
So just to make it clear, so you are talking here about a practice which
I'm
was
talking
done.
about means of exchange. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. What can we learn for today? What do we have to change? And coming from this Islamic practice, so what is in fact the theoretical framework that we can extract?
Well, if we want a sound economy, a world economy, again, we have to bring gold and silver back into the equation.
Okay.
If we don't have gold and silver there, basically money is only worth the paper it's printed on. And in fact, most money today is not even printed on paper. I think 0.02% of all the money in accounts here, there and everywhere actually exists in paper form. It's all electronic. So in the latest bailout, for example, the Bank of England was creating money electronically. It wasn't even bothering to print it. It was creating it out of nothing. If you look at the whole thing about riba, it creates money out of nothing. I lend you £100, I say you pay me 110.
Riba, you mean interest?
Interest, charging interest. I mean, there are many different kinds of riba, but the most common form, if you like, is just charging interest. That extra 10% is created out of nothing. Now, when you're multiplying this by, millions and billions and trillions, then it's a lot of money that really doesn't exist. So in fact, the whole banking system is a Ponzi scheme. It's a glorified Ponzi scheme. Now, if I can give you a practical example. Look at the American dollar, because this was the last currency to leave the gold standard back in 1973 when Nixon made that cut. Up until then, even 1973, you could, for example, change a $10 note for $10 worth of gold. They were the same.
Yes.
Let's go back to 1914. Okay. Then you would have a $10 note which said we promised to pay the bearer on demand $10 of gold. Now look at the gold coin then. So at that point, it was called a Liberty $10 Eagle coin. $10. You could change that for a $10 note or vice versa. They had the same purchasing power. Now today, the $10 note, you'd say, well, yeah, it's still $10. Unless you're a collector and it's a rare.
So the frame of reference.
But hang on, let me just explain. So but that's $10 coin. Putting aside the numismatic value, just let's look at the value of the gold today. Now at the moment, 1 troy ounce is selling for roughly $1066. A Liberty $10 Eagle coin contains 16.7 grams of 900 fine gold, so that's roughly 54% of a troy ounce. If you do the mathematics, it comes out that it's worth today 575 paper dollars. So if back in 1914 I said, well, I'm not too keen about this paper, I'll change all my paper dollars into gold, I would basically have that return. Yes, it's quite a big increase.
So what if we follow what you are saying is that in fact to come back to a kind of economic stability, we should come back to this, because the stability will be it's the same amount. So we won't have this inflation and everything which has to do with the crisis that we are facing now.
Sure. So it's like Hamlet. Really, see, Hamlet, he says there's nothing good or bad, but thinking makes it so. That's what the current world currency is. So that's the position they're in today. There's nothing up or down, but thinking makes it so.
So in fact, if we come back to what you are saying, if we come back to the Islamic, the Muslim practices at the beginning, what we can draw for today is really to find from behind the whole system something which is a stability based on silver and gold. This is what you are saying.
This is Islamic finance,
So this is it. And what, if you want, are there other principles that we can add just to have a better sense of what you would refer to when it comes to Islam?
Well, you see, that's the basis.
Yes.
Then the next step is obviously you have to take riba out of the equation. You can't charge interest.
Yes.
I mean, at the moment the Bank of England's brought it down to 0.5%. They should get rid of that 0.5% as well.
Yes.
Then you get more stability.
Okay.
And then finally, you can't actually have transactions that are dealing with the haram. So if you're talking about investment,
haram, which is the illicit,
you can't invest in distilling wine. You can't invest in a pig farm. You know, these are refinements, if you like.
Okay. So
now, if you look at so-called Islamic finance, they've tried to look at everything except for the means of exchange. But when you go back to the roots, if you go back to the early practice of the first Muslim community, it was made very clear very early on, in the time of Abdul Malik ibn Marwan. So this is Tabi'in stage.
Tabi'in are the followers.
The followers of the companions of the Prophet. Second generation. So it's very soon. And someone came to him one day and he said, "Are you making riba halal?" And he said, "Astaghfirullah, what are you talking about?" And they said, "People are using IOUs as a means of exchange." So, for example, I would want to buy 10 dinars worth of goods from you. I didn't have the money on me. I said, "Tariq, can I just give you an IOU?" He said, "Yeah, sure. I owe you 10 dinars. I'll pay you later." Then you want to buy something. You haven't got the dinars. You say to Muhammad over here, "Look, I want to buy 10 dinars worth of fruit. Can I give you this IOU?" You go to Ahmed. He'll give you the money.
Okay.
That is haram.
Okay.
Now that is a redeemable IOU. What we have here with paper money is an unredeemable IOU. So I was talking about a 1914 dollar, and there it said very plainly, we promised to pay the bearer on demand $10 worth of gold. This is a more modern $1 note, with the Freemasons' special pyramid here, and etc. And the Star of David here of the original 13 states. We won't go into that. But here it just says, this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. And it doesn't even make the promise anymore. So it's an unredeemable IOU. If you look at Scottish notes, for example, they'll still say, we promise to pay the bearer on demand. But if you go into a Scottish bank and say, could I have my sterling silver in return? They say, what are you talking about? You living in the past?
Okay. It's no longer the system. So, okay, this is the first part. We have now a sense that what you are saying is really we have to come to the source, and at the source we understand that everything which is the system itself on what it is based is wrong now, because
it's not that it's wrong, but it's just it's based on sand. It's shifting sand. It's running water. It's like Keats. He said, "Here lies." Here lies a person whose life was written on flowing water and shifting sand. This is what the present economy is written on.
Yes, but so it's wrong. It's not right. Is it halal?
It's not a question of right or right. It's certainly not halal.
It's not.
But the thing is, it's not reliable.
Okay.
It's like a spider's web. The first strong wind will blow it away.
Okay, so this is the first thing, and then we have the interest that and riba and interest that we have to get rid of.
Sure.
And then the third dimension is really the way we have to deal with even the money itself.
And again, this is not a new thing, you see. I mean, if you look at the revelation given to Sidna Musa, to Moses, there riba was forbidden.
Yes, so it's not.
And then subsequent generations, they said, well, between us, it's forbidden, but with the Goyim, with the non-Jews, we can charge them interest.
Okay. So
with the Christians, again, they said, for many years they held up, they said, we can't be involved in riba. And then with Martin Luther and Calvin, they said, well, if it's a reasonable amount of interest, then it's all right.
Protestant take on the
so they open
that
gateway.
Okay.
Then, if you look at the Muslims, they said, well, we'll try and get around it. We'll either have two transactions in one, which is haram, in fact, or we'll call it a service charge. But we'll have to link it to the interbank lending rates.
Yeah, let me come to this, because what you are saying is that we have to come back to the fundamentals, because there is a problem. Now around the world, with what we have and what was shown in the VT is really to tell us we are facing a very deep crisis, and the capitalist system is in crisis. I'm not sure, in fact, that the capitalist system is in crisis. I think that it's
the financial system is in crisis.
We can talk about this, but I think it's its own logic. What you are saying, when it comes, for example, to what is done by Muslim economists and what is done by Islamic banks, my point on this is, and I have been very critical by saying we have deep problems. In fact, we are adapting ourselves to the system, so we are making halal transactions into an ocean of what we understand as haram. And you are calling it cosmetic. So what's wrong?
Can I give an example? I mean,
let me just finish with the question. What's wrong with what the Muslims are doing now, or when it comes to what we call Islamic finance?
Well, every Islamic bank has a Sharia board.
Yes.
And they will try as much as possible to make their products what they call Sharia compliant. But they will not make it Sharia based, because if it's Sharia based, you have to have gold and silver in the equation. At the recent Financial Times conference back in November the 5th, quite appropriately, the head of the Islamic finance department of the UBS, which is one of the biggest Swiss banks, quite openly said, look, let's face it, Islamic finance at the moment is just a veneer. It is based on a raft of financial instruments which are not Sharia compliant. And those in turn are based on another raft of financial instruments which are also not Sharia compliant. So in fact, he said in so many words, if we're really going to have Islamic finance, we actually have to change it. And the whole thrust of the conference was we have to go from Sharia compliant to Sharia based. And no one spoke about gold or silver. And I kept on asking questions and saying, why aren't we talking about the gold and the silver?
I want you to clarify this. When you speak about gold and silver, you are saying that gold and silver are in fact an obligation.
Absolutely, yeah. Without it, you don't have Islamic finance.
Why?
You have to put it in inverted commas.
But why? Is it the only way to have something which is stable?
Well, put it this way. This was the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So if you're a Muslim,
this was the sunnah of the time. Can we do it now?
This was the sunnah of the Muslims, basically for 14 centuries.
Okay.
Up until about 1928. There's a very interesting book called King Edward VII and His Jewish Court by Robert Elfrey. Difficult to get nowadays, but you'll find it in the British Museum. And basically it looks at that period of transition when the big banks were saying to the Muslims, give us your gold and silver and we'll give you this new money. You know, it's paper money, it fits in your pocket more easily. And guess what? We can devalue it just whenever we want, and then you'll have to take out a loan and pay interest on it, and just when you think you've paid it off, we'll devalue it more, and you'll have to take out another loan, and before you know what, you'll have a huge big national debt which you're never going to pay off, just like England. And if I could just give you an example of England, look at the national debt of England. This was created by King William of Orange, about, 17th century, 18th century, £1 million. It was structured in such a way that it would never be repaid. In fact, it's been repaid countless times, but it's still being repaid. It's now swollen. So when Labour came into power, the national debt was about £350 billion. In 12 years, it's doubled. It's now, 2010, about £900 billion. They're saying in another 4 years, it's going to double again. The interest on that debt for this year is going to be about £30 billion. And when you look at what happened with this crisis last year, what actually happened? You know, this thing about bailing out the banks, it wasn't bailing out the banks at all. It's strengthening their position and their hold, because where do they borrow the money from to bail out the banks? They borrow it from the banks to help the banks. And then they have to pay interest on that. And so the banks win out. They're almost winning as much as they do in times of war, because in times of war the banks make a killing. They literally, but you know, they finance the killing on both sides. They finance both sides of the war. Both sides have to borrow money,
and at the same time they are making money
to make the arms, etc., and pay the soldiers. And then at the end there's all the reconstruction, and then there's the reparations. So the banks love war because that's their big money earner.
And this is also what we can just witness right now.
Sure.
Let me, because we don't have much time and it's a very complex issue. The point here is really for us to say that what is done now could be cosmetic. There is a deep problem here.
Sure.
Very often what we are presenting at the Islamic alternative is something which is adaptation to the system, not going to the fundamentals, not going to the roots of the problem. And this is what we are saying. And I kept on saying this myself, having lots of criticism coming from the people saying, no, we have, and then we have a market and the people are coming and say, they are coming because they know that in this market there is money, so they want the money much more than the principles. So if now, and we have a few minutes left, so what could be the first steps that we can present as an alternative?
The first step is traverse the process that was really started in the 19th century. And I'll give you a practical example. Nathan Rothschild, who, as we know, made his money out of the Battle of Waterloo, because he came back and he had the knowledge before anyone else of the outcome. He needed some gold bullion. He went to the Bank of England. He said, I need £1 million worth of gold bullion. I'll redeem it at such and such a date. They said, fine. They knew his word was good. When the date came, he came back and he gave them paper money worth £1 million. And they said, but you were going to return gold bullion. And he said, well, if you want, I'll go to your bank teller and I'll give them these notes, and it's got a promise to pay the bearer on demand. They will give me gold bullion out of your vaults, and I can pay you in gold bullion. So it was a magical trick.
Is this realistic today?
Now we have to do it the other way around. We actually have to start bringing gold back into the equation. So, for example, you can go to ecoal.com, you can go to edinar.com if you want an Islamic solution. You can buy e-dinars, but each electronical dinar is backed by a physical dinar. So if you want, at any moment, you can change your e-dinars into real dinars like this.
But is it possible to do that at the global level?
It's being adopted in Malaysia, it's being adopted in Indonesia. IMF are trying to stop it. And it's actually a condition of IMF membership. You can't be a member unless you promise not to bring gold and silver back into the equation. So it's actually a whole control mechanism.
So it could be the first step.
Because debt is a control mechanism.
It's to spread around this kind of transactions. This is what you think that
you have to start. You can't just go from gold to paper like that. You have to have them in parallel. Paper money still has small change still has a place as flus, as small change. But for example, when you come into the Islamic dimension, the zakat on wealth cannot be paid in paper money or electronic money or debased money.
Some scholars are saying yes.
Yeah, because they say darura, but if you want actually a sound financial system, you actually have to pay zakat in gold and silver. So if you really want to honor the deen, if you want a sound economy, do that. And look at the economy in the past. Look at all the great civilizations. At the basis of their economy, they had gold and silver, very little taxation, because at the moment, taxes go up and up and up. Why? Because they have to service the national debt. So what is the answer? Follow the sunnah of the Rasul and his last khutbah, and his final hajj. He said, riba is made haram, write it off. Whatever has been created out of nothing, write it off, pay back the capital. And if all the modern economies today did that, just write off all the money that's been created out of nothing. It doesn't really exist anyway, so it's quite easy to write off. Pay back the capital, bring back gold and silver, then you have a sound economy.
Okay, so this